Hey, let's just dive straight into use context because for a simple use case, like the projects that you guys have all been working on, it should be adequate. It should allow you to bypass having to drill through different components, passing prop from parent to child to child to child. Use context will update in a way such that anything that utilizes this context, if that's updated, then every other component that's using that same context will update as well. So if you were working with authorization, for example, you have one component that accepts or stores the token, everything tied to that, like a parent element, for example, will update as well. And so every child of that parent can then have access to that token that you're storing into use context. So let's look at, I see I'm not sharing my screen yet, so let me share my screen. So we could look at this code in action. So let's see. Today we have a very basic Django backend connected to a React front end. And as you can see, if we click on this wines page, nothing appears. Instead, we have a sign up, a login, and a log out. Logout doesn't do anything right now, as expected. So let's try signing in. I'm going to say admin and give myself a very basic password of admin. I'm going to sign up. Oh, I guess I've already created this user last night. We'll try creating admin too. And we will sign up. It's going to warn me that my password is weak, and that's okay. And then I'm going to log in. And now that when I click on wines, we could see that it's returning some data that it wasn't returning before. And the authentication persists even if I leave that wines page and goes back, and it persists until I click log out, at which point this is no longer rendering anything. So let's take a look at what this code looks like behind the scenes. As usual, we have a main component that calls app. We're rendering in a strict mode. Within this app, we have a user context and a provider. This user context is a very simple, extremely simple script, which is basically a constant that calls create context, and create context is the built-in React component for creating a context that could be accessible from virtually anywhere. So if we go back to app.jsx, we see that everything wrapped inside of this user context provider will have access to the token and the use context that is being called inside of the log out. And I think it's the log out and the wines pages in particular. So if we go to log out, for example, we see we're calling not only user context, but also use context. So user context gives us access to this constant, which is the constant that has been created, the context that has been created. And from here, we have a function to handle the logout. When a user logs out, this function is called on the button click, and it sets the user token to null. This user token being passed in from a prop being passed in from the parent app. And if there is no user token, we then use router to navigate to the login. If we go over to, and we see here, a user token will automatically update to whatever the context is. So if we are setting the user token to null, the context becomes null as well. And so when we have that context inside of the Wines app, for example, here we're also calling the user context. We're also calling use context. This context gets updated here. User token gets set to null. And here it updates as well. And so because it's updating, everything that conditionally renders if that context exists will no longer render. Any questions so far?
Where's the context in list wines? I'm trying to find it. Like
In list wine, we have so
like when
user
you said
token,
that if the user context is no, yeah, where's it basically being called there is what I'm looking for.
it's basically being,
Oh, I see it. Sorry, I didn't see user token as the variable name.
oh, it's all good. Yeah, so basically if it updates in either file, it will update in the other as well. And you could see that they're not necessarily being passed in as props. So it is pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. I think a few caveats are, again, just how you wrap your components. So I know, Philip, you were talking about wanting to be able to pass authentication to a component that is within a route. This is exactly how you would do that. We see we have a router here, we have routes, and we have all of it wrapped inside this user context provider, which is what one of the components that stores the user token. So give that a shot. Let's see if that works for your use case. And if not, then you can definitely explore some more advanced libraries. Let's see. What else to cover? I think there's also what is it called? There's a separate branch on the same repository where we can take a look at local storage. Have you all covered local storage at all, or session storage?
Yeah, I think we brushed over it at one point.
Okay, then this is going to be a very, very quick review. Basically, it's the same material. Let's look at our context local storage. That's what it's called. So I'm going to git switch to context local storage. And now let's take a look at where local storage is being called. This is not, we don't want that. That's Pokemon. Okay. So before, where we had the handle token function, we were using UseContext to store that token, but now we're also using local storage to set that token. Let's see what that's like inside of React. I'm gonna make sure I'm spinning my app up. I'm gonna refresh here. I guess it's on a slightly different port. I'm gonna sign up. Well, actually, before I sign up, let me pull up my console. I'm gonna clear this, and I'm gonna type local storage. We see that we have an empty storage right now. Let's see what happens if I sign it. I'm going to create a new account. Now that I've signed up, it's going to warn me I don't need this. I'm going to log in. And now I am signed in. And if I check local storage again, we now see that I have a token inside my local storage. So use case for this really depends on the kind of functionality you're building out in your app, but this can allow users to come back to your website after leaving and still retain whatever information or data that you want to persist in between visits. It's pretty much just like session storage, except it persists longer than sessions. And I can't recall off the top of my head exactly how to distinguish it between this and cookies, but it effectively does the same thing. All right.
Cookies are probably just more secure, huh?
Yeah, probably. I don't know why exactly though. Maybe cookies might have some like additional encryption or something along those lines. Let's see. I think that's actually really it for today's lesson. Yeah, it just lists these examples. It explains how to wrap everything in a provider, and really just have the multilingual context challenge. Were you all able to finish yesterday's challenge?
Yeah.
No.
No? Okay. I think this should be a fairly simple challenge as well. So if you finish this early, just go back to resuming the last challenge. And if you're finished with both of that, I think you have an assessment coming up. So let me get back to you, but I'll check to see if there's anything I could share about that upcoming assessment. Sound good? Cool. I will set up some breakout rooms and y'all can feel free to take a break or just dive right in. And I will be in the main room, so just Slack me or come out to the main room if you have any questions or need help looking at any of your code.